So when connecting the fuel injectors to the fuel injector machine, you're going to want to grab these, which are supposed to fit directly on top of the fuel injector. And this goes directly in here. These are caps that didn't help it from leaking when it's not being used. And you just keep grabbing another one and then push it on there, and then it slides in like that.
Once you have the injectors mounted in the manifold, it's time to tighten them down. There's a couple of screws here that we use to tighten this whole assembly, and if you notice on the bottom there's holes. There's plates here. Depending on the size of your injector, you can swap these plates out so that the injector fits nicely into the hole of the plate. You don't want them too big, you don't want them too small. So what we're going to do is we're going to tighten this down. You want to tighten that one, I'll tighten this one. And as they come down, you want to make sure you tighten them evenly. Oops. As you can see, if they're going to try and wobble around and they get tight, and you might catch the tip of the injector. So you want them to all tighten down evenly. And as you do that, there we go. Okay, so look on the bottom, see how they're all nice and centered. Okay, we don't want any of them off. If one is not centered, it's going to keep this whole manifold from tightening, and you'll have all the other injectors loose. So if you feel them, there should be a little bit of resistance on the injectors. You don't want them too loose, but you want them to be able to move around. So we're going to make this just a little bit tighter, so we have just a little bit of resistance when we move them. So this one feels really good. On the top here is where the test fluid actually comes into the injector. It's just a quick connect. So we're not going to do that yet, but we'll put this up here, and I mount it on the top platform first, because this is going to allow us to see the injectors. We're going to pressure test it first to make sure there's no leaks anywhere in our setup. Now that we have the injector set up on the manifold, we're ready to hook this up. You have to turn the machine on. The power button's a little bit hard to find, but if you reach behind the machine, you can feel where the power line comes in, and right above that there is a switch back here. Oh, there it is. You turn it on, and that's the power button in the back. Once you're on, you've got your welcome. It's going to load, hit OK. And now we're going to select the type of injectors that we're using. This machine has the capability to hook up to gasoline direct injectors. So we've got a harness here for GDI. This plugs in right here on the side of the machine. If you want to use, this is for regular standard port fuel injection. There's a harness here for gasoline direct injection. So there's a different type of injector and a harness set up for those type of injectors. Okay, so that's what those are. So we plug that in, make sure we have the right harness, and we're going to select injector type. So we have standard manifold port, so we're going to say OK. If you wanted to select GDI, you just use the down button or the up button, and you can select GDI. We're going to do standard, hit OK, and it wants to know what type of injector. It's not simultaneous, meaning we're firing all of the injectors at one time. We're going to do sequential, which is going to be one at a time, peak and hold. Hit OK. Next, we have to determine the number of injectors. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 injectors on here. So we're going to push the up button. Look over here in the right corner at the top, you've got the number of injectors. So we're going to have 6 injectors. Hit OK. Now flow time, when we're testing, it will pulse the injector for about 30 seconds. Sometimes that to me is a long time, so I always turn it down to about 10 seconds. It just gets us through our test a little bit quicker. So 10 seconds, hit OK. Now we're ready to start actually testing this to make sure we have no air in the system, we don't have any leaks. So right now we're on the prime, and it's going to prime for 7 seconds, and it's going to bleed the air from the injector. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this fitting, plug it in right here into the top of the manifold, and hit the green button to go. And as we watch that, we're going to look at our pressure. This came up to about 60 psi, and we're going to look, make sure nothing's leaking here, nothing's leaking underneath. We can also just run it again if you want. So here's again. We're going to make sure we're not nothing's leaking. I like to look at the bottom of the injector. I don't see anything there, so we look great. We're holding pressure. Okay, so if there was an issue, you might see fuel leaking out of these connectors if there's an error in the way we set it up, but right now we're looking really good. What we need to do before you do that is hook these up. So these right here, they got numbers on them, so we're going to go 1 through 6. Now, it's really important, if you are working on a set of injectors and you suspect that one of them has a problem, before you put it in the machine, make sure you label them. Get a Sharpie or something, but keep them in order as if they were in the firing order on the car. So if this is injector from cylinder number 1, remember that that's number 1. It's just easier when you're measuring and testing to identify which injector was with the problem cylinder. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're gonna label these. If you can come in here, see right on the base there's a number, right? You see that? There we go.
There it is.
Okay, so we're gonna go 1 through 6. There's number 3. And these just have a little pin they just push right on to the injector. Okay, I like to take this and just kind of fold it up on the top so we're not putting too much pressure on the harness. Okay, now we're going to run this again and we'll prime it, and watch, you'll see the injectors actually pulse. There we go. So now we're getting all the air out of the system. There we go, that's better. Okay, so we've let the air from the injectors. Next we're going to do the leak test. Okay, so that was priming, getting all the fuel out, all the air out. We're going to start that. It's going to hold this for 30 seconds. And we're just going to see if we see anything dripping, see any fuel leaking. This will be a great test to tell if you have an injector that's leaking. So it's holding pressure on it, and if there's a bad pencil inside the injector or you have something going on, you'll be able to see the fuel dripping out of those injectors. Sometimes I like to get a flashlight and look close underneath, see if there's any fuel pooling on the end of the injector. Sometimes it doesn't drip right away. It may just pool and then drip slowly after. So make sure you take a good close look. But that looks like that passed the test. Okay, so that's our leak test. Now that we've done that, we're going to go to our inductance test. So inductance is basically a measurement of resistance in the injectors. When you look at resistance in a coil, you can do you can measure the resistance between the terminals with your digital multimeter, and you could tell if the windings have high resistance. There's a spec on that. This is measuring the resistance in the injector as it's firing. Okay, and what we're going to watch for is you want to just make sure they're all even, within about 10% of each other. Okay, so we're going to run this. It's going to do 8,000 cycles. Okay, it's going to pulse these 8,000 times. I don't typically let it go for that long. You can if you're concerned, but if everything looks pretty even, then I just go on. It takes a while to go through 8,000 injections, but there we go. We're pulsing the injectors, and we're looking at the numbers here, 2.5, 2.8, and they're all kind of close to each other here. So we're at 287, 300. You see that would take a while to get to 8,000 pulses, right? So I kind of watch this. It seems like everything's going well. I don't see any major problems with that. So we're going to stop that test. Everything's good. Maybe I won't stop the test. There we go. Okay, hit the stop button. And we're going to go to our next, hit the up button. And now we're on our injector flow test. Okay, with this one, we can adjust our RPM. Right now we went to flow. We can go to auto, static flow, clean. Sorry, go back to the beginning here. Flow test. We're going to look at the RPM and see. We can change our duty cycle. Now this one goes for 10 seconds, and we can go through all these different modes. Right here we have cranking, so 200 RPM. We can do 600 RPM at 6 milliseconds, 600 RPM at 12 milliseconds, 2500 RPM at 3 milliseconds, 2500 RPM at 6 milliseconds, and so on. So it's going to go through and it's going to test these at different RPM rates simulating the engine running, and at different flow rates of the injector. We're going to put these down here. We're going to see how they flow through that cycle. Okay, so we're going to start out here at number 1, cranking 1 through 6. So we're going to bring this down here, and we're going to watch and measure our flow rate on these. So we're going to go ahead and start. So the reason why I changed our time again was it would do this for 30 seconds for each simulation, and that takes a while. So that was cranking. Now we're going to go to our next one, which is RPM. Hit go. So 600 RPM now. 400 RPM more at 3 milliseconds. Okay, then we're going to go to the next one. 600 RPM at 8 milliseconds. I'm sorry, 600 or 6 milliseconds. And we're just going to kind of go up to 12. So we can see the different volume. Again, 12 milliseconds is the amount of time the injector's pulsed on for. Okay, we're going to go to our next one. Let's just jump up to our 5,000 RPM at 3 milliseconds. See the difference in the injector pulse and the speed. We'll do that one more time here.
Number 5.
Okay, as we watch this, one thing you want to really pay attention to is how even these injectors are flowing. So on this right now, if we get down at level, we notice that injector 5 has flowed 20 milliliters, and the rest of these are not even. You want them to be all even across the board. So these last two are kind of flowing a little bit high. The number 5 is the most. So that's an issue. Okay, so that's doing our flow test, impersonating a car driving. Okay, next we can go to an automated test here, which is basically the same thing, where it'll just go through all the different cycles instead of me selecting them. So you can do either one, it doesn't matter. So if we start here, it's just going to start at 600 and go through and do each cycle on its own. So it depends. You can do it, the first one, selection 4, flow, or just the flow. We'll do it manually. Auto, it'll go through each one in sequence. So it just depends on what you want to do. So right now we're at 600 RPM. There we go. Now we're at 12. Another thing you want to look at is this kind of the flow pattern, how deep the injector is actually going into the fuel. That's easier to tell when they get fuller. We're not going to go through all of this. I'll stop this here after this one. Okay, we're going to go to the next one, static flow. This one is a really good test because it's just going to pulse one injector at a time, and it's not going to pulse, it's just going to turn it on, and we're going to check the flow of that injector. So we're going to hit start. So there's our first one for 10 seconds. If you want to as well, static flow, you can dump this fuel out and then just do a static flow without stacking the full auto cycling where the injector's pulsing, if that makes sense. So right now the static flow is showing number 2 is actually overfueling. We'll see how number 5 turned out. Four is pretty high. Five is still our winner here so far. Okay, so the biggest concern I have with this is these injectors are not flowing the same volume. and that is going to cause engine performance issues. The car will not run well. One cylinder is going to be overfueling, some are going to be starving, and that makes a big difference. It doesn't seem like a lot when you look at it, but you want these all to be flowing the exact same amount. Okay, so another thing I want to show you, if I put it back up here, I like to do this. Not only are we going to be concerned about the injector flow rate, but we want to look at the spray pattern as well. Okay, so I'm going to go through this again, and as we spray them, we want to look at the injector spray pattern. So we want to make sure it's all nice and consistent and the same across. Okay, so we're looking at the spray pattern, because if you have a plugged injector pintle, you'll have an irregular spray pattern. So you want to just compare them all to make sure they're all the same, because the spray pattern can also indicate if you have an irregular injector or something going on with the actual nozzle. I've seen injectors that flow right, but the nozzle will be bad and the spray pattern will be off, and that can cause a poor mixture in the cylinder of the air and fuel. Got 2 more. Doesn't look pretty good so far. 5 will be interesting to see what we got. Oh, look at that. That one is, the spray pattern is very different. It's straight on, and that's indication that we're flowing much higher. And the last one looks okay. Okay, so when we're done, we can take this little cover off and lift this up, and we can put this test fluid back in and we can recycle it for the next round. We put that back on just to prevent splashing. This is not fuel in here, it's a test fluid that's got the same viscosity and flow rate as fuel. So don't put fuel or anything else in here. This is a special fluid that we use. Okay, so once we've tested this, we want to check these out. We can go ahead and clean them, and then we can do our test again to see if we've made any improvements. Okay, so after we've just done our flow test, we want to get this set up to clean the injectors. In order to release the pressure off of this line, you pull out on this knob, and that will release the pressure. When we start flowing these, I'm going to start this again. Whoops. Sorry, I got to go back. I was on the wrong one. You go to static flow again and run these. One thing I didn't show you is to adjust the pressure. You turn this knob on the inside, and it changes the pressure on the injectors. So you can adjust that to your whatever your spec your car is at. Once you're done and there's still pressure on the line, before you release this, you pull that out, and that releases the pressure on the rail. Okay, and then to unplug it, you just pull this knob here and pull it back. It's a quick connect, and now you've released the line. Okay, we're going to go in, and actually our last step is to clean, but in order to do that, we have to take the injectors and put them into this cleaning solution here. It's an ultrasonic cleaner. It puts ultrasonic frequency through the fluid here, and it'll pulse the injectors and clean them. Now what we have to do is get these injectors here out of the manifold and into the fluid. You don't want to take the injectors apart and get this fluid, the test fluid in the cleaning solution. So what we have to do is take these off, go ahead. I like to dump this out here in the top because it makes kind of a mess. Okay, there's this little bucket here that we use this for. And we'll just release these. You got to keep the connectors on, because we're going to have to turn these on and get all of the test fluid out of the injectors before we put it into the cleaning solution. So we're going to go ahead and pop these out. You just need to get them loose enough where you can pull them out of the assembly here. You might need to go a little bit more. Once you have it out, you'll get a little bit of fluid. There we go. Get that all drained out. Okay. We'll just pull this out. We won't need that on there. Stick it back here, or pull it off to the side. Now, what we're going to do, I start with number 1 injector. What we've got here is we've got a fuel pressure or an air pressure regulator. We want to regulate the air so we don't put too much airflow into the injector. You can damage it. So we're at about 10 psi or so of air. Now, if we come back here, we want to keep it on static flow, because that's going to turn the injector on and hold it on like when we were testing it on the last test where we just keep the injector on the whole time. So we're going to hit start. Whoops. Don't do that. Anyway, you can throw that down there. We're going to hit start and it's going to pulse the injector, hold it on, and then we're going to take this air and just pump it in there. You can see the fluid coming out of the injector. Okay, and that's all you need to do. So that goes for about 10 seconds and then it stops. Okay, then it's going to go to the number 2. So you can stop it and keep going. It says mode 1. You'll just have to, you can feel the injector click. So you go through each one of these injectors. I didn't take them all the way out, but you'll take all the injectors out, drain them out, blow them out, and then once you're out, you'll take that injector, you'll leave it hooked up, and you'll set it into the cleaning solution. Okay. Once you get into the cleaning solution, you will go to clean, and there is different modes here, I think. Clean injector, bath. Nope. Okay. It goes through a whole cycle, and we can hit 10 minutes, hit start, and you can see the fluid pulsing the injector, you can hear it, and you just let it run through its cycle, just like that. If this fluid level gets low, there's a little sensor here. It's in the bottom of this wood cabinet, but there's a bottle of fluid, and if you put water in there or anything else, it will not like that fluid. It has to be the actual test fluid for this. So that's all you do. You run it through there for 10 minutes, let it run its cycle. You pull them out. You want to clean them off with the air again, put them back in the flow bench, and run your test again to see if you have improved flow rate.